Gretch, I should have told you to save it for the stream because right before we went live, you were telling us a story about your first ever fantasy pick. Do you want to tell the people who it was?
Yeah, it was a kicker. It was Jason Elam, 3rd overall in 1999. I was 12 years old. He had just made a 63-yard field goal the year before. One for the history books.
Yeah, you weren't worried about regression on 63-yard field goals after
no,
that?
I wasn't. And I was. It's funny. I was just looking it up because I saw this question on Twitter. It pops up from time to time, and I always have a pretty funny story on it. He was 6th in the league in field goals that year. I mean, it's not like he was, terrible.
And did you even check if there was going to be, scoring, for kickers in this league? I feel like that'd be pretty devastating.
I was 12. So what happened was I bought the magazine the night before on an overnight train ride home, found 3 pages in the back of this like football preview magazine of a fantasy sports thing. And I was like, this is right up our alley. Like we were already into sports, in the stats and everything. Got home, told my brothers. Literally that evening, it was an overnight train ride. That evening, we drafted 4 people. It was a 4-man league the first year. We were up to 12 the next year, though. We were a legit league by 2000. But 1999, yeah, I was all in on Jason Elam. I didn't know anything about scoring. I didn't know anything about fantasy. I didn't know anything about anything.
Did you?
What was that structure?
Did you roster a second kicker just in case? You got hurt?
You handcuff him?
God,
too
that's a
soon.
good question. I wish I could remember, but my inclination is probably I may have had 3 kickers.
Leone, thank you for joining us tonight from Arts and Crafts HQ. How's it going?
It's going well. I would have been more prepared probably with the green screen, but I was watching an episode of Mayor of Eastwood and I had to finish it. It got pretty intense.
There you go. But you do have your motherfucking Mackey Award shirt on, so you're still ETR branded.
Yeah, I figured that was good enough, represented.
There you go. And Pat, how we doing?
Doing good.
What's it like to be a full-time fantasy analyst these days, other than now firing off shitty tweets?
Hey man, you're just getting off. You're the best reply guy in the biz, and I'm just throwing you softballs here.
Is that in your contract that you need to do more fantasy football tweets?
Yeah, I'm just lobbing them to you. I'm just trying to help you out.
Or is it just because you now have a front row seat to fantasy football's best shit poster and Denny Carter that you're now just so inspired?
Yeah, I think that might be part of it too.
You guys brainstorm tweets around the Sports Edge water cooler or what?
Well, you're sitting there. You got to read Twitter for 6 hours in a row, and so you start to sound like Twitter after a while. That's what happens.
There you go. So tonight, I saw some people in the chat were hoping that we were going to do a draft. We can't do a draft every single night. I mean, maybe we will here soon.
Don't speak too soon.
But we want to talk some projection stuff tonight. Not necessarily completely in the weeds, but about maybe some assumptions we have about certain teams. Obviously, when we're doing all these best ball drafts right now, we are making big assumptions about how these teams are going to play. And mainly these guys were discussing some of the situations where we might be wrong in those. So I don't know who wants to kind of otherwise set the stage for this. I know some of the teams you saw on the thumbnail there, I think it was the Seahawks, Pat, were the one that has been bouncing around in your head as maybe a team we're wrong on.
Yeah, that's the one that had kind of come to mind for me, but I'll throw this to Leone to start because I was listening to the podcast you just did with Eric Beinfor on best ball strategy, and you guys were talking about some of these same ideas, particularly with the 49ers, which I'm really into the 49ers as well. And I think that might be kind of like the key one where like ETR's projections are kind of low on the 49ers, and I think it could make sense to be, but at the same time, I feel like you can both see how it makes sense to project them for a fairly low volume offense and then also see them it's a big offense to target, and that's sort of what makes this so interesting to me.
Pat says we're low on the Niners just because we're not super high on Ayuk.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
The Niners are tough to figure out because I think a lot of people are really concerned that they're going to be run heavy and now you've got Ayuk healthy, Debo healthy, Kittle healthy. They're going to get maybe even run heavier than they've been in the past because they have a rushing quarterback in Lance, and they're really focused on this pass volume and what it can support. And the way I look at the San Francisco offense is this is an offense has highly efficient quarterback play from quarterbacks that haven't really played well. Nick Mullins, Jimmy Garoppolo have 2 of the highest yards per attempt the last 3 years. And I think it's kind of universally accepted they haven't really played that great at the quarterback position. That's why they traded up and took Lance at 3 overall. So what me and Eric were talking about is like what if Trey Lance is really good or even just a big step up? And this offense that has seen efficiency from the quarterback spot with poor quarterback play, what kind of efficiency are they going to see with good quarterback play? And if they get that good quarterback play and that crazy efficiency, they might just score a ton of points, right? Like it's crazy simplistic, but if they score a ton of points, people are going to find their ways to value. And I also think that the pass rate, it's not going to be high by any means, but it might not be quite as severely low as people think if they kind of offset rushing quarterback, add some rush attempts. But if they're more confident in the quarterback and they're playing well, they might call a more aggressive game. So I'm pretty in on the 49ers and even their running backs. I look at Baltimore's situation with that's run heavy and has 2 guys, and you've got Dobbins going in the 3rd round. Why are Sermon and Mostert going like 7-8? The combination of their price tags versus Dobbins and Gus Edwards doesn't totally align with me.
Gretch, where are you on those guys?
I get all the takes. I think maybe just because I've been hanging around these guys so much that I'm starting to feel like maybe we're a little bit too optimistic on the bull case on the Niners. The yards per attempt stuff is really interesting. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's largely dependent on yak, right? Like it's Kittle's yak. It's Debo taking tip passes and getting 12-yard gains on a pass that literally, had a negative air yards.
Right.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is if you have, let's say Lance is incredibly good and he's very good vertically, or he's passing in different ways that these other quarterbacks weren't, does that replace some of the other passing production? Or I feel like the efficiency, it's easy to look at the number and be like, oh, the yards per attempt has always been good even with bad quarterback play. Wow, what if it's good quarterback play? It could be even better. But I don't know if it really can be better. It's almost like it's maxed out artificially.
If you're going to be able to manufacture this with quarterbacks that aren't playing well, and then you add, a more vertical element to the game, it can get better. It can be more explosive.
I think it would be close. It would be efficient still, but then the concern is how much do they pass because they do want to run. And so it's like, will they be that much better than they've been in the last few years?
I think they could easily lead the league in points scored. I'm pretty high on them.
And I thought, Leone, you referenced the show you did with Eric Bimeford the other day. I thought was really good too, and I think it's a really interesting way to frame this conversation versus creating, median projections versus trying to win a top-heavy $1 million prize. And it is kind of similar to the DFS thing where a lot of times, sure, do we wish we could pay up for Mahomes in every lineup? Yeah, that would be great. But we're trying to identify who are the guys the market doesn't think have top 3 or 4 upside, but within their range of outcomes realistically do. And I feel like that's the kind of question we're asking for these teams. Like, what teams hasn't the market baked in the upside of the scorched earth, Dallas Cowboys kind of campaign?
Yeah, and Kevin argues that if Lance hits, he's going to hit like Lamar Jackson. It'll be kind of a narrow target tree. It won't be able to support multiple weapons. But that is the assumption that the market's making. And we don't know that. We don't know how Lance will hit. We've never seen him. And the other thing that I like about the 49ers is this is obviously hurts if you're stacking, like true stacking. But they're probably going to start the season with Garoppolo. If Garoppolo stays healthy and plays well, he might play a fair amount of the season. But Garoppolo's only playing if he's playing well. And I think Lance, in most cases where he's playing a large part of the season, did so by earning it. So there's this, you kind of have a couple outs if you're betting on Ayuk and Samuel to good quarterback play.
Yeah. And we always talk about kind of overrating the available targets. You know, guys get hurt, stuff happens. You know, there's still an upside case to volume for Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo. It's not probably in the traditional sense that this team is going to throw a whole ton, but yeah, I think they're a good case.
Gretch, if you're not quite as, necessarily as amped as Twitter is on the 49ers, who is kind of a sleeper team for you whose upside might not be baked into their collective ADPs?
Well, with them, I would just say, I think, I just want to be clear. I'm still a little bit excited, and I like the efficiency case. I think Debo's undervalued, especially.
Yeah,
but like when we say the market's not valuing it, Kittle's going really high. You got to obviously pay up for him, and Ayuk is going very high as well. So I think the market is valuing it, other than Debo, basically.
I think if you play, I think as we get into more, I don't know, if we get less out of underdog best ball, it'll be a little bit different. But on underdog best ball, yeah, the prices are decently full. I still have Lance as like my highest exposure player, I think, so far.
He's cheap.
Mania.
Yeah.
Ayuk also isn't that expensive. Rich Rebar pointed out in his piece about getting the number one wide receivers on teams that he falls into the kind of this bucket of guys that have been undervalued. I guess that's partially because Kittle is being taken as the top weapon in that offense, so it's a little bit of a unique case, but he's not all that expensive given that he's the number one wide receiver being drafted on a team.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't checked out that article that Pat just referenced, Reeves wrote that up for Sharp Football and kind of looking at the data buckets for wide receiver ones on teams and where they've outperformed relative to their draft position, and some interesting takeaways there, because it made me a little, and I think we've talked about him on the show, like it feels gross taking Kenny Golladay right now, but for a wide receiver one whose talent we all agree is very solid, it's a pretty palatable price point.
Agreed. Yeah, and shout out to you, Pete, for pointing to that article, the Fantasy Life newsletter is where I saw that.
Oh, really? I didn't know if you stumbled on it your own, but yeah, lots of good work from Reeves over there. And yeah, the other kind of big conclusion too of just it gets a little more dicey once you get to the wide receiver ones more in that 7th through 9th round range, which it's intuitive, like they're being drafted there for a reason, because there's probably pretty reasonable concerns about the offense's flaws at that point. Right.
But I do agree with Ben that I think Debo's the most undervalued skill player there.
Yeah. Let's do this one. This one's interesting. And this is a team I've been drafting a lot on Underdog for the Best Ball Mania tournament. But I'm not hearing a ton of conversation about the Colts, a little bit uncertainty with how Wentz factors in. They still have some young wide receivers. Their tight end situation feels a little in flux as well. So what are your guys' takes on the Colts?
Isn't Eric on the Colts?
Yeah, more for their, I believe, for the schedule and just kind of their ADP prices more than anything.
Yeah, I have a ton of Paris Campbell. So far, the first two teams we talked about, I have two of my highest exposure players in best ball so far, in Paris Campbell and Trey Lance. But as the Colts as a whole, I'm just kind of like lukewarm on, I guess. I think Jonathan Taylor's fine where he's going as like a workhorse running back that you can build around, that I would take after like the clear top 5 guys. Offensively, I mean, I do expect him to throw more than last year, but they're probably still slanting on below average pass rate.
They're good too. Like their offensive line is good. Their defense is good. Am I choppy?
Your audio is good. Your visual is a little bit.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I mean they're good, and Reich has been pretty game script dependent. I don't know. I don't have good data on that. Maybe Leone does better, but just from stealing signals memory, basically,
I want to look into which coordinators call games like more extreme based on the game script.
And I've had that take on Reich for a couple of years. Like I remember even just a couple of years ago when they still had Ebron, like Ebron snaps would spike to like 80% when they were trailing. And then people would play him in DFS the next week. And I would try to put in my content like that was just because they were trailing and they had to throw a ton. They're in those packages. And the next week he'd go down to 40%. And people would be like, what happened? Why didn't Ebron play 80% like he did last week? And it's like he was just very specifically game planning from a game script perspective, and it was Marlon Mack, and it was Taylor to a degree. I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about Taylor as well because you do have Hines, but Taylor's just such a good talent that he's somebody that I still want to get some exposure to. But I think they'll throw as much as they're trailing, but I kind of think they're going to be good. So that makes it tough.
One of my concerns is like Rivers' teams kind of run up tempo, and like he was still really good, pretty good efficiency wise last year. And he really didn't take many sacks. Like his sack rate was 3.4%. Now the line that Ben mentioned has a lot to do with that, but we know quarterbacks or sacks are somewhat a QB stat. So I'm a little worried that there's just like some small lost value on the margins here with the switch from Rivers to Wentz, unless you're just really buying a Wentz resurgence.
Somebody is going to catch passes here, though. Like
it's tough though because they rotate their wide receivers a lot, and Eric was making the point that like they, there's a lot of uncertainty here in the wide receiver room, which is true, but it's also tough because like Leone, weren't you projecting them for like, when you were doing the weekly projections for the Colts, it's like what was the market share? It's like 18?
Dude, it was nuts. I remember looking at the data and. We look at like a lot of like last four, like chop up the different segments of the season for target share. And there were times where there wasn't a Colts guy above like 15%, which is just, insane. Like, no, absolutely nuts.
Well, speaking of that, do we have a little bit more at least condensed at tight end with Burton out? They were in like a three-way timeshare last year.
And Hilton was banged up, but when Hilton was healthy, he was still like the number one. Like, and Paris Campbell was hurt. They were sort of, I wonder if like all of that across the board, to your point about tight end, but almost across the board was by necessity a little bit. Like if Paris Campbell's really good, I actually think he's a great guy to have a ton of exposure to. If he's actually very good at that price point, he could be a guy who could catch 100 balls because this offense could dictate it. And they're not gonna do a huge rotation and make sure like, I don't know. Who else do they even have? Zach Pascal or whatever. I can't remember.
Yeah, Zach Pascal.
Yeah, I mean,
are those guys going to play over Campbell?
Like I think Pascal will play some. Like they were working him in.
Yeah, he will.
But I think it'll be more condensed. Like it's probably gonna be more condensed. Pittman and Paris Campbell seem like they have an opportunity to emerge. And then tight end, I don't know. I don't really know what to make of the tight end room.
I'm interested in Mo Alley Cox, but there could be another shoe to drop here with Zach Ertz. I mean, this is one of the most obvious spots for him to land, and he's gonna get cut. The Eagles, they just brought back Richard Rodgers. Like Zach Ertz is landing somewhere. It might be Buffalo, but it could be here. So it tempers my enthusiasm for the tight end.
Zach Ertz is going to catch 85 balls with the Colts at 5 yards a catch. That's happening.
That seems
feel like
plausible,
it.
actually.
Yeah. It's so gross. I mean, I've been drafting a decent amount of Mo Alley Cox late. Is anyone drafting Jack Doyle? Like I haven't seen.
We did in that draft the other week.
We stacked him.
We just took
What about Kyle Granson,
Dark
boys?
Oh yeah, this is the whole other thing. Then fantasy Twitter's favorite darling, Kyle Granson. I mean, he's not going to do shit this year. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't get too excited about a fourth round rookie as far as best ball
He's
goes.
going to play.
Pat, did you get in enough on your Seahawks take? I know we transitioned to Niners there.
I didn't even talk about the Seahawks.
Yeah, so let's go.
Yeah. So the Seahawks are the ones that, because I'm doing these team previews for the site, and I was going to try to trade for the Seahawks if I didn't get assigned them, but I got assigned them. So it was pretty sweet. But like looking at Brian Schottenheimer in his past, just like his history, because I've had this feeling for a while that I feel like we're overrating the impact of Pete Carroll's desire to move towards the run this year. Like that is a fact. He wants to move towards the run. He's pissed off about last year. Got rid of Schottenheimer, brings in Shane Waldron. They're going to move towards the run. Cool. We all agree. But Brian Schottenheimer was not a good offensive coordinator, and he did not lead good passing offenses. The highest he ever had was the 14th ranked offense in passing yards. This guy worked under Eric Mangini, Rex Ryan, and Jeff Fisher before working with Pete Carroll. Like that's his lineage.
Was that before Seattle? The highest he ever had was 14th ranked, or
no? That was
Seattle.
That was with Russell Wilson. Yeah, it was with Russell Wilson.
Great stat. That's terrible.
In 2018, Russell Wilson finished 3rd in adjusted yards per attempt, 7th in adjusted net yards per attempt, 11th in QBR. The team finished 27th in passing yards. Brian Schottenheimer is not a good offensive coordinator. The fact that he was fired is good. Shane Waldron comes from the McVay system. The system here could be similar to what we saw from the Titans with Arthur Smith, similar to what we see out of Kyle Shanahan, similar to what we've seen at times from Sean McVay, where, yeah, there's going to be probably more running than we would think is ideal, but it's running to set up play action, running in a way that looks like your play action game, marrying the two together, designing a smart passing game, utilizing guys in interesting ways instead of just having DK Metcalf run the same routes every single play in ways the defense knew was coming, knew when to double team, and we're basically forcing Russell to beat them with their third option, which was David Moore. Third option's probably upgraded with Dwayne Eskridge, and they're going to be doing everything more creatively. I think this offense could be really, really fun, and I don't really care if they run a little bit more than they did last year if we're going to get a lot more creativity and a lot more of a modern offense.
Yeah, I'd also be surprised if they weren't still positively like pass happy, like at the end of the day with those weapons and with Russ.
Well,
like I'm projecting them to pass more than average, which is still.
What
like
about the fact that
last year.
Yeah, I mean, I love this take. What about the fact that every single year the Seahawks seem to add like 2 to 3 new running backs? They bring in UDFAs and all this stuff. Like Chris Carson got hurt a little bit last year. Are we sure Chris Carson is like that great of a real life running back, or is it just more of a fantasy? Like we like him because he's good in fantasy, or other people like him. I never liked Chris Carson. I want that on the record. Rashad Penny is getting knee scopes. Like they still have Travis Homer and DJ Dallas, but like this is not an improved running back room by any means. So we're expecting this huge shift back to running a ton. Is it like, are we that confident Chris Carson's going to play 17 games? Are we confident Rashad Penny is going to come back and be healthy? Who are they planning to lean on here? Alex Collins?
I was just gonna say real quick. I was writing about Rashad Penny today. He had that knee scope recently. He's still not ready to play. They're saying they think he's going to be ready for training camp, but it's looking pretty dire. I mean,
Leone's favorite player.
I have a lot of Rashad Penny. I'm gonna have to dial back.
No, after talking all that smack in 2020 about Rashad Penny,
like, dude, you were smashing Rashad Perriman when he had one leg, and you were like, Chris Carson sucks.
I mean, and who is like it? Let's just take Rashad Penny out of the equation and rest in peace our best ball shares, Mike. But is it Homer? Is it DJ Dallas? I mean, because I want to be interested in the RB2 on the Seahawks.
I mean, I don't know. It might be DJ Dallas.
It literally might be Alex Collins. Like it could be any of these guys. Like he's still on the roster, and they turn to him at times. But are we underrating like them getting to camp and be like, oh yeah, we have DK Metcalf, and all like a little bit of this goes out the window. To your guys' point, I think it's a great point. Like they have so much more talent at receiver. Maybe that's been true in the past. They have so much more talent at quarterback than they do at running back. It's hard to imagine.
Waldron was the passing game coordinator for the Rams. He comes in, he's coached tight ends, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and then he was the passing game coordinator. So he got hired by saying, like, I'm going to install this kind of more run-heavy attack. You're going to love it. But he's thinking about the passing game, I'm assuming. So he might not be shoving it down teams' throats just for the sake of it if it's not working, to Ben's point.
Like, we also have to keep in mind when we say they're going to be more run heavy, like relative to what baseline. Like they came out like on fire with the pass game. Like they were insane pass rate over expectation. Like obviously we're not going to get that, but like, so does more run heavy mean relative to that or relative to, the league average? So like if it's just relative to how nuts they came out to start the season, like we're still fine. We got plenty of room
I think
to come down.
I agree with that. Doesn't the market kind of think that they're going to just be back to their old ways, like 2019 and before, and the second half of the season and all that?
Well, that's what the chat is saying, that they don't see a lot of chance for upside at the ADPs. I agree. Metcalf is expensive. I don't find Lockett in the late 4th, early 5th, or Russell Wilson as the last of the elite QB tier at the end of round 6 where you're able to get him right now. I don't find that as fully baked in, but am I crazy?
Oh, It feels like
that's
the
my whole point.
Niners thing that we talked about, right? Like on average, they're probably going fine, but there's still a lot of upside.
Yeah. Here, did any of you football guys have a take on their defense this year? Because I feel like that's a whole other thing. Like they just played game script last year. Like if they had a lead, they ran the ball. And if they were down, like they would reluctantly throw the ball. Like, is their defense going to suck?
Probably.
I don't think it's me great.
That helps. That helps our cause.
They lost who was their corner? The twin, Shaquille Griffin. They lost Shaquille Griffin.
If this room's ready to talk defensive players.
Yeah, we're still getting up to speed on the defense.
Like, all right.
I mean, they basically didn't add anyone significant. They lost Shaquille Griffin. Those are two things that I know. So they weren't good last year. I mean, Jamal Adams is holding out too. So that's, a plus.
That'll help.
Yeah. And one guy, and I think Burnzone mentioned it in the chat. I mean, I love Gerald Everett at his price in drafts right now. I think he's a huge upgrade over their previous tight ends. And I think he's like a legit above average tight end that is now in a much better scenario, not fighting for targets with Higbee.
I'd also say to the ADP point, like Russell Wilson is going like 20 picks after Kyler Murray and those types of guys. So there's still there's a sizable gap if you view him in that tier, to where if he just jumps up to the beginning of that tier or is like truly an elite quarterback this year, he's underpriced. DK Metcalf is going wide receiver 7. Like he could finish as the wide receiver 1. Like that, he has that kind of ceiling. I mean, he's a physical freak. If the offense is more creative and not as run heavy as we're thinking, wide receiver 7 is not fully baking in his upside. Not saying he should be going there, but I think it's not like he's so expensive that you can't start to think about what Seattle might look like in an upside scenario. And then Lockett's not super, super cheap, wide receiver 21, but certainly upside for him. And Eskridge, I think, is definitely worth his price as a dart throw.
Lockett is super sexy from the perspective of the Rams passing game coordinator coming over, being the new OC, establishing this run and play action based yak offense. Lockett's going to run a lot of those sprint outs that we see Cooper Kupp run. I mean, it will be Eskridge a little bit too, I'm sure, but Lockett's going to get some easy catches and some room to run and make plays, I think.
That's a good point.
Also, because I was grinding the news, part of that penny blurb today was Eskridge got hurt as well, and it seemed like it was more than just like a day thing. Leone, are you cursing your shares over there?
like I come on this stream and it's just like, hey, next thing you're going to tell me something bad about Trey Lance, and I'm just going to log off.
Oh, you didn't see?
Leone, are you serious? You haven't refreshed? we won't do. Who is your highest owned player right now in best ball drafts, Leone?
Well, it was Lance and Paris Campbell, but I had a lot of late Eskridge and a lot of late.
I mean, Pat just caught my attention with that Garoppolo take, because earlier you were saying Lance was probably going to play week 1. You said Garoppolo's probably going to play week 1 and will play as long as he's doing well. Could be half the season, I think you said earlier on this show. So
he's being nuanced, Greg.
I mean, to me,
I'm still betting on Lance.
Okay.
I'm still betting on Lance because I think he's a lot better. But I just think that if you're betting on Ayuk and Samuel, you can also go, well, if Lance isn't good, then maybe you get good play out of Garoppolo. So you got a couple different ways.
What who is the wide receiver 4 in Seattle?
Freddie Swain.
Swain.
Okay. All right. That might be worth a little 18th round pick here and there.
I think I have one Freddie Swain in the pre-draft tournament share.
Yeah, if Freddie Swain, he could easily be this year's David Moore, where he has a few games where he scored a touchdown.
Don't get carried away.
Yeah. I mean, league-winning upside.
Okay. Gretch, any other teams here that you think there's some meat on the bone relative to their ADPs?
Yeah, I mean, we got to talk about Tennessee. Right? Yeah. Kind of by rule. Me and Leone got in a Twitter fight over it, and then also have gotten in DM fights over it. So
we weren't really fighting over it.
I know. I'm just kidding. Are you checking your exposures? I was trying to get a rise out of you. You're over here really intently looking at something.
Oh, I got
the news.
Data. I got some data for the people at some point. If we're I mean, part of what Ben and I were talking about via DM, even Tennessee agnostic is just, and we were talking about our group chat too about change in number of plays teams run and basically this stuff year over year isn't super stable, right? So the correlation of a team's, of course I lost it, of a team's pass rate, to their pass rate the previous year is like 0.33. Like that's not very high. That's like 10% explained the next year. Like, so 10% of these teams' pass rates this season, we can kind of explain away based on last year. And it's probably higher than that if you manually account for coordinator changes and stuff, because that doesn't do it. But it's similar with plays run. Plays run, there's a little bit of a higher correlation. But, we're talking like maybe a 15% explanation, which means there's 85% that's out there that's probably mostly variance, but maybe some coach related stuff we can sneak into. But regardless, if you're projecting teams on the extreme, there's a lot of room to really get burnt. The team we talked about in our group chat was Washington, who ran 55 plays last year, and they ran 55 plays in 2019, and then they ran 65 plays per game. That's like adding almost 3 games to their season in terms of fantasy points. So, that's just another notch in the corner of, betting on talent in some of these situations. And when you're doing projections, to not over rely on last year just because it's a firm, tangible number.
One thing I want to say about what you were saying about the sort of lack of year over year stickiness of those stats. One article, and I was talking about it with Leone as well, but I wrote for CBS last year, was looking at my projections from 2019 against the actual just for play volume, passes, and rush attempts. And in 9 of the 32 teams, I was off by a substantial margin, and it was for reasons that it wasn't just because I suck at projecting. Like, no one did it. Like, I do suck at projecting probably too, but like 9 of them, that's a pretty significant percentage. It was, Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. Their pass rate came down, 100 plays and 100 pass rates, or overall passes. San Francisco was expected to be better, but they went all the way to the Super Bowl that year. They got so much better. They went 13-3. Their run rate exploded, and like they added like 10 wins. And I was already projecting them for a significant shift. I wrote this in that article. Anyway, there was like 9 teams, and that's when we talk about the chaos of the league. That can really wreak havoc on projections. I just think that's an important thing to consider as well, is just like how much of the league we're probably going to be wrong on. I mean, I kind of think when I do projections, like I might be way off on like a third of the teams for reasons that I couldn't possibly foresee. There's nothing in their past data that's going to tell us, what those things are that, that are going to happen in the coming season. So you have to just be like, I mean, projections help in some ways, but you also have to be open to the possibility that like something ridiculous can happen. And this actually gets back to the Titans point. My point on the Titans last year and this year, it's like Derrick Henry has gotten a ton of usage. Maybe he's just, unbreakable. Maybe he's like literally Bruce Willis. But if not, he's probably at more risk now than he was even last year, because he had another 400 touch season. He's done it back-to-back seasons. I don't know how many more years he can do this. He's someone that I've been playing with this idea of like an identity back, that like Tennessee's whole offense is built around Derrick Henry. If he goes down, we don't know what their offense will look like. They're not going to give Kari Blossingame 30 carries a game. Like, we don't know what that will mean. So
what about Darrington Evans? Was this a Darrington Evans rant?
Yeah,
because I kind of want it to be.
That's a real Darrington Evans slander.
I'm old enough to remember the blurbs where they comped him to Alvin Kamara last year during the preseason. So no, I think that's a really good point too. And it's like the same thing, not to go back to the Seattle stuff, but if Seattle, all of a sudden got just Andy Reid as their coordinator overnight, like how insanely excited we would be for their offense, because we know what Russ and those tools are capable of. I think that illustrates how fragile it is. You're telling me one of these coaches wakes up on the side of the bed and has a slight change in how they want to do things, or to Ben's point, an identity piece of the offense gets hurt and the whole offense looks differently. I mean, those are the scenarios we're trying to capitalize on, especially in large field stuff.
Yeah. And now that they have Julio, like, if Derrick Henry goes down, don't you think they're going to shift to passing? Like, I asked Leone about that, and he said, like, probably they'd be close to neutral, but you're already regressing him quite a bit, right, Leone? But
yeah, I think that's probably some of our argument was just miscommunication that like I have them at about a 58% pass rate this year. You know, they were 51% last year. So, and part of that just because it is so noisy year over year, I'm regressing them a decent bit. So that already kind of bakes in a little bit of natural regression, even if Henry's healthy, but also the like just unknown, which would be Henry getting hurt. So like I have that baked in a little bit.
Yeah. But still,
throw more.
Even beyond that, if Henry were to miss games, you like on a 1-game weekly projection for DFS, you would probably project. And obviously, that would come down to like game script and everything, or implied totals. But I'm assuming neutral situation, you would project a even higher than 57% if Henry was out.
Like right now, me having no idea, I still think they'd be run heavier. I'd probably put like 60%, which is like slightly below average pass rate. Like,
but even that would be almost close to the change you just discussed with Washington, right? 51%. No, that's only percentage points, not plays. But 51% pass to 60% from last year to this year, not compared to your projections, but compared to last year's benchmark.
Yeah, compared to last year. I mean, if you're passing the ball like 32 times a game, the 10%, that's an extra 3 attempts times 17. That's like 51 more attempts.
50 more attempts.
A game and a half.
Game and a half of attempts, which is good.
To the volume point, though, losing Arthur Smith may end up hurting their pace. Pat Thorman talked about this in his pace preview. This was a team that was pretty fast-paced and now has an offensive coordinator who we only saw a single season from. He's worked under Arthur Smith now for a couple of years. He was with Shanahan for a couple of years, so like hopefully he's kind of matured. I think he was with the Raiders in the 1 year we saw him. Wasn't very good. He ran a very slow offense, very low-volume offense. That's like a concern, I think, especially with how does he handle the unforeseen? Like if Derrick Henry goes down, one option would be to go, pedal to the floor, run the offense through Tannehill and the receivers. But another might be to still try to keep the passing game low volume by going slower. If they really believe that, they can't rely on Tannehill for a ton of volume in a given game. So I think like you could see it go the other way if Henry goes down, that they just run a lot less plays.
My thing with Tennessee, I'm not concerned about them, but like kind of to Pat's point, I do think there's some takes out there I've seen, which is, they added Julio Jones, they're just going to be insanely good, but like the pace probably regresses. The defense probably isn't as bad as it was last year. As much of an upgrade as Julio Jones is, he absolutely is an upgrade process-wise. His team's more talented offensively than they were last year. But Julio is probably a dog to replicate Corey Davis's season a year ago. Like they ran like really hot last year, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think like adding Julio and some of this efficiency stuff, it makes them a better team on paper than last year. It makes them a better team process-wise. But as far as the actual result, they'd be lucky to score how they scored last year.
And this is probably bad most of the time, but they play Houston twice. And if Houston doesn't have Deshaun Watson, like they're just not going to have to go up tempo and high volume to beat Houston.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like they were involved in multiple shootouts there. That was one of those huge games last year. One of Derrick Henry's huge games was against Houston. So
that's actually an interesting point, Gretch, because you were one of the people last year that was wisely, beating the drum about how so much of Corey Davis's production was in garbage time with the soft coverage catching up. Like, how do you look at Julio's opportunity for volume relative to how Corey Davis earned it?
Well, that point gets to some of why I was kind of pushing back with Leone and a little bit with Pat in our little discussion on Twitter about what Julio means for A.J. Brown, because Tannehill, the way he plays, this is like sort of a film take, but the way he plays, like especially off some play actions and stuff, like he makes reads pre-snap, he drops back and he looks away from Brown sometimes. And famously in the playoffs had Brown wide open for a potential long touchdown that could have saved their season and didn't even look to his side of the field. That's something he did all year last year. And it worked most of the time. It was something I like struggled with in stealing signals. I'd be like, well, like Corey Davis is doing good. He's always running wide open off play action because A.J. Brown's drawing all his attention and Tannehill's making the right reads. That, to me, is just sort of how Tannehill plays. So I was always a little bit suspect about the idea, or at least the percentage chance of that scenario where A.J. Brown gets 200 targets, because I just didn't think he would lock into him if they're rolling bracket coverage, they're rolling safeties over, they're putting all this attention on him all the time, because Tannehill just kind of makes these pre-snap reads and makes his decision a little bit before the snap. Sometimes it doesn't even look Brown's way. So for me, Julio is taking all the targets from everyone else on the roster, all the ancillary receivers, the tight ends. There's teams that have had 2 receivers have 30% target shares. I mean, this reminds me of the Vikings a couple years ago with Thielen, Diggs, and Cook, where that was like their whole offense. They were a very concentrated offense.
Or the Vikings this year, probably.
Yeah, probably this year again, right? But it was a couple years ago where I remember Thielen and Diggs got like all of their targets. The third receiver got none.
Why wasn't A.J. Brown at 30% last year then, though? Like,
that's what I was saying. Like, Tannehill chooses to go away from him, essentially, pre-snap sometimes.
Gotcha.
So,
I thought you were saying that it could be like 30% A.J. Brown and 30% Julio.
Oh, yeah. I was using – I think the Vikings were there at one point, but it might be more like 26 with the Titans. But, yeah, like two guys could be like the main pieces.
Yeah, I think they're going to be super – heavily targeted, both of them, but I don't know. It's hard to dismiss the notion that the range of outcomes on A.J. Brown's targets didn't take a hit.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I agree with that. But what I was trying to say was the heavy target scenario wasn't the one I was really drafting Brown for. It's almost like if you were drafting Brown for that reason, you may have been drafting him for the wrong reason. I've always made the case he's going to be a high efficiency player his whole career because of this really rare blend of before and after the catch efficiency that he has. And
is the upside on top of drafting him for that. It was like, holy shit.
Right.
This highly efficient player, like, because it's a little bit easier to run hot on efficiency, right? Like this highly efficient player starts seeing double-digit targets a game, not even like 200 for the season, but like oh my God, like this is the wide receiver one.
So I'm not even saying he's necessarily running hot. I'm saying his efficiency mean should be higher because players that played like him, and it's not just Julio and Calvin Johnson and Terrell Owens and bigger receivers. It's also like Deshaun Jackson and Tyreek Hill. There's a cohort of players that had his type of downfield targets, depth, and the ability to earn targets down the field and yak on top of that. And there's not a lot, but there are some smaller receivers that also have that. And whether they're big or small receivers, if you can generate efficiency before the catch and after the catch, you're going to have to suck at both of those elements for your efficiency to not be plus, right? And he's actually good at both of them. It's like because he is diversified in his efficiency.
Is anyone not projecting A.J. Brown to be the most efficient wide receiver in the league?
Right, but we were talking about multiple paths to him being a star, whether it's like a Tyreek Hill type, lower volume, high efficiency one, or like a Michael Thomas, Devante Adams one. My argument is you should have always been weighting the Tyreek Hill sort of stat line heavier, and you still should be. You should be happier now because Julio's there, and now you're not going to get triple teams.
Whenever Ben talks about A.J. Brown, I just see this in my head. Just whatever Ben's talking.
Like there are paths out there that are created to upside that are there now because of the huge efficiency. There are also paths taken off the table because of the target ones. And like when you weigh at the end of the day, like from a purely fantasy perspective, you would not want Julio Jones if you're.
But I do think, I guess I'll agree with Ben on that. I think like A.J. Brown is having an awesome season probably more often now that Julio's there. It's just that the most awesome seasons were the ones without Julio.
Sure. And that was a tweet I said sort of tried that line as well. Leone didn't really agree with that tweet, but I agree with that take. I think A.J. Brown's like 98th and 99th percentile outcomes are not – they're less likely to be hit. I do think like the 85th to 95th percentile got better. Leone, I think, disagreed with that.
I'm a hard disagree on that.
Yeah, that's not even what I think that like the 30th to like 60th percentile range got better.
Yes. Like, I mean, if you played like anyone who's played DFS for years, like his DK salary is lower with Julio Jones than without it. Like it's like I mean that's just the same thing with Ridley last year, and it's also like hard for him to push.
Oh, was Ridley bad last year?
You were saying with the San Francisco quarterback stuff. I don't know what you said. I'm going to ignore it. But like what you said with the San Francisco quarterback stuff,
Ridley was a great point for my argument. Is what I was
there's like an element of like how much higher can AJ Brown's efficiency go? Like he crushed everybody in yards per route run last year. Like, and then the other thing too, I'd say, and you're not going to like this, and you're probably going to boo me off here, but
Oh god.
Isn't there like a 20% chance that like Julio Jones out targets?
I did it for you.
That was the right call.
Yeah, it did say like I wasn't gonna let him kind of even float that out there for you. I mean, do you have anything you want to say before we bring it back on?
No, I think you said it.
All right, you're back, Leon.
Thank you.
I can't believe you just floated that on the show.
That is wild.
That's like saying you're out on Laviska Shenault at his current ADP. I mean, just like, come on.
I'll book Ben offline at if he's going to give me more than 5-1.
Hey, how are you feeling about Aaron Rodgers starting week 1 for the Packers?
I thought he had.
You guys have a bet on
a different team.
Yeah,
or is it week 1?
I think. I know. I just said that like that because that's how I remember it. But I want to talk to you about it. I don't remember exactly what the terms were. I think it was start week 1. We're gonna have to go back and we're gonna need to get producer Belair to go back and find that discussion on ship chasing.
You might be right, but I think it might have been week 1.
Yeah,
which I'm gonna backdoor into because he's not gonna get traded, but he's gonna hold out.
Also,
I'd accept that fate.
As usual, shout out to Eric Belair, the one on the 1s and 2s of the ship chasing Twitter account. Thank you, Eric, for manning the helm on that while we argue about run pass splits. We appreciate your work. And thank you to the people who are hopping in the Discord tonight as well. What were some of the other teams you guys were discussing in there? I saw some Patriots and Dolphins talk as well, I want to say.
Yeah, Pittsburgh was one I wanted to talk about. I think we're sort of getting into the thinner plays, but Pittsburgh, I was like, I feel like there's a path here to bet Pittsburgh. Like, if you think the market's wrong, and it's probably Juju Smith-Schuster, because the market's convinced that they're going to be run heavy. Najee's going really high. The market does not want pieces of this offense, which is why I think Najee's being overdrafted. But then the piece they definitely don't want is Juju. Juju's being – so you have like a double assumption. One is that they are going to successfully pivot to the run and be a lot less pass happy. And then 2, that Juju's going to be third in the pecking order. And he did have a pretty bad season last year, but he's been pretty good. And, prior to that, and he returned on a 1-year deal, apparently asked to be out of the slot less. They have a new OC there. So you could see his role shift, and maybe he's getting a little bit more of that Deontay stuff.
What do you make of that? Because he also said some stuff about like Ray McLeod's going to play in the slot now. Like, if Juju's outside, who's sitting? Is Claypool sitting?
Oh God!
I mean, Deontay should be the one sitting. He was not actually very good, although he's getting. I don't know. It's tough with Deontay because his yards per hour was pretty good because he's getting targeted constantly. But it's like, is he just the first play on all these? The first read on all these plays, or is he actually getting open constantly? He's dropping the ball. We know that. But if he was getting open all the time, maybe Juju sits. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess that's a point, is that I don't know. And the market says they do know Juju is going to be the odd man out and the offense is going to be run heavy. And I think it probably will be. And I think he probably will be, but it feels like getting Juju exposure might be a good idea.
I like that. He's a guy that we're sitting here kind of microanalyzing how the Pittsburgh wide receiver snaps are going to spread, and that matters. But when you zoom out and take a long view at Juju's career, he was a great prospect. He was elite as a 21-year-old at the NFL level, for his age, phenomenal. And then he had an incredible season as a 22-year-old, 111 catches, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. Ridiculous year as a 22-year-old. Obviously got hurt in his 3rd year, and Ben got hurt. Last year was in a weird low A-dot role, but he's just one of these guys that could have some situation regression we're talking about if he's playing outside or whatever. 97 catches and 9 touchdowns still are good stats on top of that. So, it's not – and he was the one guy that actually played full snaps all year. Deontay got benched for drops, like you said. Claypool got weirdly benched late in the year for who knows what. It's still confusing, but – Juju was their full-time guy all last year and then re-signed. So you got to think that he got some type of I don't know if he got insurance or what, but you'd think that they still kind of think highly of him. It's very similar to Amari Cooper. It reminds me so much of Amari Cooper. Year 1, age 21 and 22 is a good prospect, crushes. Everyone thinks he's a top 5 dynasty guy. then has this disappointing year 3 and a disappointing year 4, and then becomes really good. And actually, Cooper became good in the middle of year 4 because he got traded midseason to Dallas, right? But
right.
It's so similar.
Some of us and Hassan were willing to play him in the FFPC playoff challenge.
Yeah, that's true. I knew that by bringing
Leone was on.
Leone was going to get to dunk on us, but it was worth it. And you were right, Leone. We should have played him in the playoffs.
We should have played.
We had him on one team, and it was live. The thing with Pittsburgh that fascinates me is it's not necessarily a bull case. I just think like whether they're good or not, like things could swing a ton. Like I think Najee's being overdrafted on those range of outcomes right now, where if they're bad and they're inefficient, Najee's going to end up with a lot of empty volume. One of the things you told me, Pat, is he's not a playmaker. It's not someone who's going to break off huge chunk plays. He needs the offense to be good around him, even though he's going to get the volume, which is super important. But to really capitalize on that, if you're taking him in early round 2, you need the offense to be good. And the pass catchers seem a little bit the other way, where it's such a condensed offense that if they're kind of can get there just on receptions, and you can get there on empty volume as receivers because you're racking up catches and yards. It's not as important to get touchdowns and run super hot on efficiency. And then if they do happen to be good, I think there's upside for them. But I don't know. Their line's not that good. Ben seemed pretty dusty last year. We're talking about, is Juju bad? Is Deontay bad? When really maybe just Ben is very bad.
Hey, man, come on. I'm not that bad.
So
I got to
really
take real quick.
Yeah.
You had those ADPs up there.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm drinking tonight. So I'm workshopping a take. I said last week, maybe Shenault should be going ahead of Chark. I've kind of hinted that I think Debo should be going as high as Ayuk. Now that we're in this spread offense, heavy wide receiver, era, right? Teams, I've said before, I think that trying to figure out who the team's number 1 wide receiver is kind of a flawed exercise in some cases. But we know with running backs, when a team is in an ambiguous backfield, you kind of just take the discount, take the cheaper of the 2 options, right? Are we at a point where we should be considering that at the wide receiver position too in some of these offenses? Talent matters more at wide receiver, but as long as we have reason to believe that player is at least decently good, why not take Debo over Ayuk? Why not take Shenault over Chark when we don't really know what Urban Meyer's going to do? And why not just take Juju and take the discount? Can't we apply that?
My only other thing, though, would be I do want to factor in second-year breakouts for these wide receivers who have already flashed and shown efficiency in a big way. But the Ayuk example, I feel like Ayuk is there's still some meat on the bone, but Debo's grossly underpriced. But I'm ready to take Lamb over Cooper, especially with this injury stuff. I'm ready to take Chase Claypool over Deontay Johnson. I'm with you. I'm okay with Shenault right next to Chark, but that would be my only other additional consideration of those.
Yeah, I think you want to consider the player profile of this. That includes second-year breakout. It also includes with Ayuk. I think he can become an alpha in a way that is not really in the cards for Deebo Samuel. He's a very specific type of wide receiver. He's very good at that. I agree that he's underpriced, but I still think Ayuk should be ahead of him.
Gretch or Leone, you gonna pour cold water on our wild exuberant rankings?
I'm just out here thinking of the angst I went through doing Steeler projections, having to depress Juju Smith-Schuster's projection, now finding out all along I didn't have to do that.
Right? We're only doing that because the market is saying we should do that. Why is the market right on that? I don't. I'll tell you another one. We mentioned Miami. Why is Devante Parker not going to lead that team in targets? I honestly think he's going to lead that team in targets. He was their number 1 last year when he was healthy. Tua threw him 14 targets twice in the 4 games he played with Tua. Will Fuller's new. We know changing teams is not a good thing. He's going to miss week 1 on top of it. He's suspended. Waddle's a rookie. Why is Devante Parker not going to lead that team in targets?
Yeah, I have him leading the team in targets.
Okay.
I'm with you.
And he's the cheapest.
It's a guess.
Do you have him in targets per game, Leone? Is that because Fuller's missing week 1, or you have him?
I have him with a higher target share than Fuller. But I have these guys all really close. I'm kind of this one's really a who knows to me. I feel good that we should be projecting Deontay to out target Juju. I feel pretty good about that.
But if this is a similar who knows situation. I mean, the spread from Fuller to Parker is much greater even than our.
Yeah.
Look, I have been and I'll give this another one. I'll give Sean credit for. I've been a huge Fuller guy all along, and drafted him basically every year, and always known like he's good, and we all probably are in the same boat. But he is good at football. But if I'm going to fade a guy that I like and is good at football, it's going to be because he's a little bit pricey, but also look, he's changing teams. He's suspended. Coming off suspension is typically not a good thing. He is probably going to get worse quarterback play with that team change. Like all of these things are bad trends. So
but have you accounted for him being better in best ball? Like the one pushback I'll give on Will Fuller, like obviously he's not going to be as efficient as he was with Deshaun Watson, but I mean he was like a 4th round value last year in the games that he played. I mean, so we're talking around end of round 7 here, basically. So, in a vacuum, like it doesn't seem like a totally egregious price.
But do you think he's going to be like he was last year, or the drop off from QB, the change in team trends?
I'm saying it's like it's a 3 to 4 round drop off from the value he produced last year. So like it's baked in at least somewhat.
But I think Parker could just like essentially see more targets than him. Maybe not be better, but Parker's not bad, by the way. Like Parker's been hurt all the time, but was a decent enough prospect. I don't know, Pat. You were kind of off Parker as a prospect, if I recall. Is that right?
I was on. I did. I got the thing half right, where I was like, we can't draft Kevin White. We got to be drafting Devante Parker. So
you were with me.
I was kind of on him. I was kind of on him. Yeah. But my thing with Parker, I mean, you're making a really good case. It makes me wonder if you're doing stacks, that Waddle and Parker with Tua might be pretty interesting, because Fuller can kind of probably get there regardless. But if Tua has an awesome season, he's going to be bringing along the secondary options.
Yeah. And I'm seeing what made me think of this is I keep seeing everyone loves to share lineups. I keep seeing the Fuller, Waddle, Tua stack, and people are like, I stacked Miami. And I'm like, you might not have the number 1 receiver, first of all. But like, even beyond that, why are we so sure those are the way? Like, I don't know. Parker's price is weird to me.
Well, plus that's a popular stack. If you go the other way, if you don't include Fuller or you do, but you also have Parker, I mean, that could be a differentiator with a popular stack, but you have a different side of it.
Yeah. Waddle, he seems, whenever I see him, he always seems to go a little earlier than I want to take him. And it seems just a little pricey for me at that portion in drafts. I don't know. I don't quite have the stomach for it, especially when, like Ben's saying, Parker's available almost 20 picks later.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, Parker and Fuller, too, skill set wise, are both downfield high A-dot players. Like for Waddle to come in and have like a really big rookie season, it doesn't really feel like it's a great setup for that, in my opinion. He could be a good player long term, but he's got two probably good players.
I think Waddle is the type of rookie that you want to target, because you want to target the guys who are going to get there on efficiency. And
that's right,
because none of them are going to be having huge roles. Like even the guys like Justin Jefferson stuff didn't have huge roles. They would have some weeks where they had a ton of usage, but over the course of a season, they're not delivering elite roles, even if they're delivering elite best ball value. So I think Waddle's like a pretty good target. I guess I just wouldn't like exclude Devante Parker from those targets, because why couldn't you go Waddle and Parker together?
Yeah.
The question for me is how much of this ADP is just people I saw someone in the chat earlier saying like I draft Parker every year and I just get burned because he gets hurt. Like how much of it is just people baking in like I don't want to deal with the injury stuff? Like if you said Parker's going to play a full 16 games this year, what would these ADPs be? Because to me that's kind of
right. And what's so funny about that is that's what everyone said about Will Fuller last year. That's why Will Fuller was 3 rounds too cheap. And then because he stayed healthy until he got suspended, but didn't actually get hurt, that we're now like fine with Fuller's health. It's super weird.
It's what have you done for me lately? What was the last thing you did for me last year? And that's what I'm going to extrapolate to this year. Yep.
You got hit for PEDs. I don't care about that. As long as you didn't hurt yourself. As long as I didn't see a soft tissue injury.
Yeah. Leone, any other of these teams that are kind of giving you top-down projection nightmares?
I I think those are the main ones. I know Ben was talking about New England, how this could be a big shift. I mean, they were just so insanely slow paced and run heavy because Cam physically cannot throw a football anymore. If they switch to Mac Jones, somewhat early on and he's decent, that could be a team where we see a really big shift. And then as far as a team that I could see changing just in terms of plays run, the Jets have a new coach.
Yeah.
They were away from the Adam Gase disaster. We might be shorting them just because we're not giving enough volume. That's probably going to be there just because people are lazily using kind of the total attempts from last year.
I completely agree with the Jets. The Jets have been a team I like a lot this year. Dynasty, best ball, all of it. I think Zach Wilson is going to provide some fantasy upside because he's the type of quarterback that takes chances. He's going to run around a little bit. I also think with the Jets, you see how much they're willing to shake things up. Denzel Mims is running with the twos right now. It's really early. It's not saying he's definitely going to be a backup, but they're clearly willing to try out Keelan Cole over Denzel Mims, and they're willing to use Elijah Moore all over the formation, not just out of the slot. Apparently, Chris Herndon is splitting the tight end 1 reps with Tyler Kroft. They're just kind of throwing stuff against the wall right now. So this is going to be a very different Jets team. It's just constant reminders that this is a very different coaching staff. They're going to be trying out a bunch of stuff, and they're not going to look like last year's Jets probably at all.
The Leone, did you adjust Crowder's rank at all post-contract restructure, or were you already had him kind of with that uncertainty baked in?
I had a lot of uncertainty baked in already. I already had Elijah Moore decently ahead of him. I feel like this was but I docked him even further. I feel like this was the worst case scenario. Crowder could have gone to a team that really wanted him, used him out of the slot. It's tough for me to do the projections for them right now. This Denzel Mims stuff is really kind of a pain in the ass. I don't know how much to pay attention to it. I've definitely gotten cold feet drafting him. I don't know. They are a very difficult team to project. The running back situation's a mess. I've been drafting the hell out of Tevin Coleman for free in the last round.
Are you mixing in Ty Johnson at all?
I haven't been. I think I will on FFPC where it's full PPR. I'll mix him in a bit more. Jack Miller's been talking me into Michael Carter, even with him kind of being the assumed guy. He's still not terrible in the 9th round. I before had really been kind of off Carter as hey, we don't know who's going to play. Why would you draft Carter in the 9th round? But I guess with news of him running with the ones early in this poor depth chart, I don't know. It is all over the place. I don't have as much Elijah Moore as I would like, but I have no idea what to do with the targets with Keelan Cole mixing in.
This is kind of hilarious because I was going to bring up a team that Chat brought up while Leone was talking, and I was going to reference Jack Miller, who Leone referenced while talking. But the Bengals is another one I wanted to ask you guys about. Their offense, we're super high on. And we're super excited about Joe Mixon. We're excited about all the receivers. We're excited about Joe Burrow. There's concerns about their offensive line. Miller did an awesome look at the implied totals throughout the entire season, essentially, or I think the first 16 or 17 weeks, so the vast majority of the season, and looked at what teams the Vegas lines were implying would score the most and the least points, and he showed the top 5 and bottom 5. And I thought it was really interesting that Cincinnati was in the bottom 5. Dallas was in the top 5. We frequently talk about Cincinnati being sort of Dallas North, but Dallas is actually being priced that way in Vegas. Cincinnati is not. They're being priced like one of the 5 worst scoring teams in the entire league. Are we too high on this whole offense?
If we are, it's because they're O-line. And they just had a swing tackle go down. They didn't have a great O-line last year. It's projected to, I think, be a little bit better, but not great. Still kind of one of the more poor O-lines in the league. So yeah, I mean that would be enough, right? If the O-line just sucks, and Burrow's not that mobile. It says his knee's 85% right now. Presumably he'll be at close to 100% before the season starts, but who knows what that means exactly. It might mean that he's not able to deal with guys in his face quite as well. So I want to be really high on this team. I am high on this team, but I think if it all goes to hell, it'll be because of not being able to protect Burrow and him not being quite as mobile as he might be before the injury.
Is this like just looking at the pecking order for ADPs here? Is this kind of similar to the Steelers? Jamar Chase is Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins is Claypool, and Tyler Boyd is the undervalued Juju in this scenario?
Love
Tyler Boyd's always a little undervalued.
God, love Tyler Boyd.
Pat, you wouldn't let me draft Tyler Boyd last year.
Well, I think you're trying to draft him over Ronald Jones, so that might have been right.
I think this order's about right.
No. I think the order. I don't know. I prefer Higgins to Chase, and I don't know if I'm crazy for that or not.
I'm with you. I think if you gave me the exact same price, but I would probably take Chase. But price adjusted, I'm happier about Higgins.
I'll agree with that. Like I wish Chase was back a little bit more, but if I'm at the 4 or 5 turn and I have to take one of them, it's going to be Chase.
It is tough. I kind of agree with both of you. It is tough. Like Chase, we can think two things. We can think he is potentially the best wide receiver prospect since like Calvin Johnson or Amari Cooper or whichever one you want to pick. And we can also think that he's joining a team that does have 2 very competent veteran receivers who are already established and have played with the quarterback, and that might make it tough for him to just be like a monster as a rookie.
Hey, we got the shower narrative with Chase too, though.
Yeah, we got that going. You're right.
It's like the shower narrative. These guys were setting records together in the shower.
But then you throw Mixon on top of those ADPs. The Bengals have 4 players going in the top.
Full screen.
Because I want you to explain what records were being set in the shower.
The LSU offense.
Okay. All right.
In the shower.
Yeah, you're like, they were setting records in the shower.
Literally in the shower.
Most suds per team of anyone. Okay.
I don't have any inside information.
They're gonna run so many plays. Like I just think that the upside is like where you want it. But yeah, there's probably a case for these guys to fail a little bit.
With an ADP of 77 or higher in their skill positions, that's a lot. Because
it is.
Receivers.
I have them worth it, but it is a lot.
Yeah. That's got to be a good offense. It can't be a bottom 5 scoring offense. That's what I would say. And that's what Vegas is.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
This is what I've actually been thinking about too with Chase, and when I have a hard time pulling the trigger, like, isn't his best case scenario a Lamb-esque season?
We don't know what would have happened with Lamb if Dak stayed.
Yeah,
that's
healthy.
true.
Lamb was sort of like on pace with Jefferson when Dak went down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Lamb was cheaper though. Lamb was
better.
significantly cheaper than Chase.
Yeah. But I mean, maybe we were just wrong on that though.
Yeah. But Chase is definitely a better prospect than Lamb. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's a lot of guesswork with this stuff. I'm just kind of banking on how good everyone tells me Chase is, and I can see it fitting in this offense. I think they're just going to throw a ton. I think they're going to hopefully generate enough scoring opportunities. I mean, obviously, if they're bottom 5, it's not going to be good. The Burrow ADP is like, I don't know. It's weird. It's like I'm really high on all their skill players because it's so condensed. But yeah, Burrow at QB9, like he's going really early. And
you did just reply to that because that's what I laughed at.
This is one of the hottest takes I've ever seen. That's spicy. You might be able to get some odds on that, Harbs, if you want to get the money down.
Sure you can. But
yeah.
I mean, that's so true because there's no tight end there. There's no wide receiver 4 at all there. So they feel like a team to not take Burrow with, especially with the Burrow rushing stuff. Like, I don't know. There was a report earlier. Denny Carter's mentioned it a few times of like how Burrow was talking about how he's probably going to run less going forward. That's not what we want to hear. No. So, I mean, if that's true at all, then the move is probably to take like 2 of these guys and, not take Burrow.
The team total, like the points scored affects the quarterback too, like significantly more because they're so touchdown dependent. Obviously the running backs are too, but the receivers can get there in a variety of ways. And it's kind of good to have a really condensed offense. And then if an injury occurs, it's even more condensed, So it's like, because you don't want to over project volume, but you're not really over projecting it when there's still a ceiling like beyond our base assumptions here.
That's
which
fair.
Is nice.
That's a great point. And I don't know if you just said this because I was only half listening, but you made a point, or we used some stats that you made a while back about the Bengals, about their massive pass rate over expectation. Did you talk about that recently?
No. I mean, I said I think they're going to.
We've been talking about the past 10 minutes, Ben, while you've been zoning out.
No, but that's a great point. Like, they have a massive ceiling for all the reasons you just said, and also.
All right, Ben's got to tell. When he doesn't listen, he just says that's a great point. And
no, I heard the second half of it. It was a great point. He said there might still be a ceiling above this, and I think there might, for the reasons he just said, and a reason I wanted to make sure he didn't already make the point on, but it was the pass rate over expectation from last year that we talked about a few weeks ago. But it's another good point that adds to what you were saying. I wanted to build off it, but I didn't want to build it off if you already made the point.
If they're league average in scoring, like that's all they need to get to, I guess,
Okay.
Because they're going to throw a ton, is what you're saying. Yeah.
They're still bad.
And it's condensed.
I mean, yeah.
But the condensed stuff makes such a difference. Like, you're looking at the Panthers, and it's like they could be more condensed than they were last year when they were extremely condensed. Terrace Marshall's probably not going to be able to do what Curtis Samuel did last year. Not even in terms of the scoring, but just in terms of drawing that much of the offense. So that could be so much to DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, and it's Ian Thomas and Dan Arnold at tight end. Like, they're not going to draw much away. There's plenty left for Christian McCaffrey. Like, when you have that situation, it makes such a gigantic difference, because obviously we're not excited about investing in a Darnold offense, but those guys are still good targets.
Are you talking about the Darnold that's glowing and just emanating charisma right now?
His charisma and energy. Like, if that, like, he must be bombing in OTAs right now, if that's all that Robbie Anderson can say.
Dude, Robbie is he's a quirky cat. I could see him having some weird
I missed that. That's a real quote. He's emanating charisma.
Yeah, that's a real quote.
That's a real quote from Robbie.
He said he's like, there's a glow about him right now that he didn't have in New York.
There's a glow about him? That's what you say about your pregnant wife, man. Come on.
Hey, I mean, in a lot of ways, Sam Darnold is Robbie Anderson's pregnant wife. You got to keep her happy. Throws those deep balls to you.
There is a corollary.
But
now that's a shower narrative.
But to the concentration point, I mean, Justin Jefferson was 6th in PPR points per game at wide receiver. Adam Thielen was 10th. And Dalvin Cook was 2nd at running back. That's with a team that is boring as hell,
And where you don't want Cousins. So, I feel like you could go McCaffrey, Anderson, DJ Moore, and just not have any part of Darnold. Like, that's viable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and isn't that kind of, I mean, that's similar to the Vikings, right? Like, you can draft
See, this is why I asked before I made points if someone just made the point.
Yeah, he just made that point.
You found
Leone just made that point about the Vikings.
It was a great point. It was a great point. I wasn't paying attention. I'll drop myself.
Pete has put himself in timeout.
Yeah.
But yeah, team concentrated offenses,
Team concentrated, it makes a huge difference. It's almost like how you can draft with the Vikings. You can draft Adam Thielen.
I deserved it. I started looking at my best ball teams. I have like 8 notifications. I'm on the clock, and I couldn't help but look.
I don't blame you. It gets me unsettled. I have 8 hours, and I'm rushing to make picks to not have to have the notification come up again.
Yeah, where our brains are completely broken. I was thinking the other day, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to try to do. I know I won't be able to do this, but I'll make 2 draft times a day where I log in to make my picks. We'll see how it goes. Do you think I can pull it off?
Sometimes if I miss one late at night, dude, like I've picked with 10 seconds on the clock.
Wow.
I'd love to see a video of that.
I think I've only auto drafted one time so far out of 20 teams, one pick, but
that's impressive.
But if you get hit the night before, like if you're doing something the night before and you get hit, even with the overnight clock extension, if you wake up late or you're just trying not to check your phone first thing in the morning, like it can be trouble.
I know. I'm trying to, do a sweep, and on the night teams where I'm 1 or 2 away, putting a guy in the queue. Cause I'm terrified of the timeout. But the worst is when like earlier in the draft, you draft your quarterback. And so then you toss in like the late round receiver, just so you remind yourself. And then that's what gets timed out. And you're like, wow, you just took Mecole Hardman in the 5th round. It's like, God damn it.
Oh, wow. Did you just out yourself as taking Mahomes early?
I did in one draft. Dude, I can't even do this. Like, I think Sam was in the draft or someone outs me for whatever I do in a draft. If I try something that is waiting on, not waiting on running back until like the 11th round, I'm exposed as a
You're
fraud.
an influencer. You're too big.
You're too big.
I just want to do one draft in peace and like, let me just step
Never
Mahomes.
again.
Let me
Never
step
again.
Mahomes on one team. Is that a crime?
I went on Norris's stream and we took Kelsey in the 1st and Mahomes in the 4th. So I have a Mahomes stack.
Yeah.
Can you bring up Sam's comment here? This genuinely stresses me out. Like, looking at this, I am feeling anxiety. Like, oh my god, do they send that? Is that the first one you get, or is it the second one you get?
What do you mean?
Because I think you get like a "you're on the clock" message, and then if you miss that, they say "FYI, it's your turn to pick." So when I see that message, I'm like, it could be anywhere from like 7.5 hours to 10 seconds until this clock expires.
Yeah, it's very scary. All right, Sam, you want me to? I'll go pick for you, buddy. I'll go pick. Any other final takes here?
What other teams?
I'm excited to do a projections pod on every single team with Ben.
Oh baby.
I don't know if the world's ready for it.
I'm ready for it.
This is gonna be good.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah, when is that going to see the light of day?
I think Monday is going to be our first episode where, of course, we're going to talk Tennessee right off the top. We're just going to
and don't tell Leone, but I've been really busy since I got back from vacation, and I've barely started my projections.
you got 4 teams to do by Monday. I think you can handle it.
I can handle that. All
You
right. I thought you'd be like, you're that far behind, but no, you don't care.
You don't really need to do projections for Tennessee if you just hold up the AJ Brown, Dolce, Van,
That's a good point.
Leone, you might want to get the YouTube for ETE finally up and running, so Ben can hold up the AJ Brown.
I love that you want to kick it off with a division where we have a team that will get us like. You want to get like in a schedule when you're like in a new pod, but we could probably spend the entire time just arguing about Tennessee. And then 2, we have Houston. How do you even project Houston? Like,
but isn't that interesting though? Like talking about like a complete disaster of a team. And then I figured it'd be good because you got AJ Brown, Jonathan Taylor. I'm trying to keep you happy as my guest for these podcasts.
I mean, those players make me happy.
I know. I'm feeding you the happy.
Give me at least a half chub. Like, let's be honest.
Okay.
I don't think Cleveland's in the mix here. All right, guys, this has been a wonderful evening. Leone, thank you for coming on this stream. I know it's tough out there. You do these pods with Silva. He's making you eat grass. He's bullying you. And then you get to come on here and, talk with fellow nerds who don't mind, getting their hands dirty with some projections.
Yeah, much better way to get your hands dirty with spreadsheets than with actual grass and dirt.
Yeah. Leone, do you know what I was thinking? You're lucky that you did the randomizer draft before that show with Silva, because someone would have made you eat actual grass on the randomizer stream for sure.
People definitely caught on with that because it's in our Discord. I've seen it in the chat a few times here. So I might have to eat some grass.
That's the new, like, I'll eat my hat if I'm wrong. No, you will go and eat actual grass.
Wait, this is from when you had someone pay to cut your grass? How does that
to be clear, Ben did listen to the podcast with you and Silva, but he was just half listening.
But it was a good point, though. It was a good point. Silva it was kind of a bit where Silva was making fun of me for being in the spreadsheet so much and saying I need to get outside and not only smell the grass, but physically eat the grass.
Well, but someone was also saying like that you would prep for the podcast and you had done yard work and therefore he was more of a man.
Silva had done his yard work. And then I pointed out that I do, in fact, pay someone to mow my lawn.
I also love this idea of ETR literally paying you to spend your time in the spreadsheets and then Silva bullying you for doing your job.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good bit.
All right, guys. Ben Gretch, I saw someone in here win Substack. Ben, I don't know if you refreshed, Eric, but Gretch had 7 new articles out this week.
They're coming. They're coming in conjunction with the projections pods. So
awesome. So lots to look forward there. For those of you guys in the Discord, we circulated a survey about Vegas and about drafts this summer. If you haven't filled that out, if you don't mind doing that, we'll have more updates on that soon. I would say it's looking good for a Vegas trip. We will
looking tentatively good.
It's looking tentatively good. So we will have more updates on that. Hopefully seeing everybody in Vegas. So for Leone, the grass eater, for Gretch, for Ben, you made a good point, Gretch. For Pat Corain, the shower narratives. I'm Peter Overzet. I deserve a timeout. We'll see you guys next week.